Kansas State at Arizona is going to prove which one is capable of competing for a Big 12 championship. And the answer is not Arizona.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. It's great to have it back in full swing. We've got games tonight, ASU, Texas State. We've got games tomorrow that we're going to discuss, and of course, a full slate this weekend. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 against a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Who's winning the Backyard Brawl? One of 3 major rivalries in college football taking place this weekend. We'll talk about that with Mountaineer Paul and picking every game in the Big Ten, including a Big Ten inter-conference game. Inter, I don't know. English is hard. Indiana, UCLA, the battle for last place. We'll talk about that coming up on today's show. But we start with Kansas State and Arizona. So this is not actually a Big 12 conference game. Spencer, that doesn't make any sense. No, realignment doesn't make that much sense. This is where we've gotten to. This game was on the schedule. Nobody could find another non-conference opponent, so they're just playing the game and it's not a conference matchup. So if you look later in the season and the battle to get to the Big 12 title game comes down to these two teams, don't be confused and think, hey, this team won. They've got the head-to-head. Well, it's not a conference game. Does the head-to-head come into play? We'll just have to wait and see. I don't think it's going to get that far. I think Kansas State's going to win this football game. This is being played in Manhattan. That's one reason as to why. The second reason is I have far fewer questions going into this matchup, which is Friday night on Fox, about Kansas State than I do about Arizona. Which isn't to say I don't have questions about Kansas State. I absolutely do. But Arizona, in their 2 games, has had a poor defensive showing and a poor offensive showing. Kansas State, in their 2 games, has had a good all-around showing, not a great defensive showing, but they were able to force a couple of turnovers late and go beat a good Tulane team on the road. Make no mistake about it. Tulane is going to push for a college football playoff spot this year and the American Conference Championship. That's a higher quality opponent than the New Mexico team, who, while better perhaps than expected, went into Tucson and dropped 39 on the Wildcats. They allowed 260 yards in the air and another 210 on the ground. That's not a great formula for stopping Kansas State. Now, you could see a lot of points in this game because Kansas State's defense against Tulane on the road, while opportunistic at times, was also really bad at times. They had some coverage busts. And the way Arizona wins this football game is if Kansas State hasn't cleaned that up. If they have not been able to get their communication down in the secondary and you've got receivers running wild, I pray for the sake of Kansas State fans that you're not turning Tetaroa McMillan loose. That might be wide receiver 1 in the 2025 NFL draft. Noah Fafita, reigning Pac-12 freshman offensive player of the year. Those 2 guys are really good. My questions about Arizona have been the rest of the team. So far, I've seen about what I've expected. I can't say I thought New Mexico would go into Tucson and put up 39 points, or that NAU would challenge the Wildcats and they'd walk away with an ugly win and their defense would make some adjustments, but the offense would struggle. Didn't see those things coming, but I didn't buy into Arizona before the season as a Big 12 conference title contender the way that I do for Kansas State, though I picked Kansas to get there before the season, and we'll see if the Jayhawks can figure that out because they're not exactly rolling right now. But Arizona's run defense got better week 1 to week 2. Now you might be saying, Spencer, they played NAU. Well, they only gave up 89 rushing yards. You compare that to the 210 rushing yards they gave up to New Mexico, it's an improvement. It's the improvement you would like to see, even though it's against an FCS opponent and an average one at that. When you go into Manhattan, the number 1 most important thing for Arizona in this football game, you better stop the run. You better not let Kansas State go wild on the ground. If they do, they're not going to ask Avery Johnson to throw the ball 25 times. They might want him to throw the ball 18 times. They'll keep Noah Fafita and Tetaroa McMillan on the sidelines, and they'll have to be bystanders to what could be a really exciting football game. The Wildcats are favored by 7.5 points. The way they cover that number is if they run the game, or if they run the ball, control the game through their ground attack, Avery Johnson does enough. He's a good complementary piece with his arm. He, of course, is a dynamic runner, and Arizona can't stop him. I don't think Kansas State can go win this game by 20, 30 points. Can they cover 7.5? Yeah, and I think they're going to. Arizona hasn't shown me enough. Now they have to go on the road for the first time. They've played their first 2 games in Tucson, have not been great. They have to suddenly elevate their game against a good team in a hostile environment. That's asking a lot. You got a new head coach in there. They're working out the kinks. They could be a better team by the end of the season than they have shown in the first couple weeks of the year. But I think Kansas State goes out there, wins this football game. If Kansas State gets at least 200 yards on the ground, I don't think Arizona's got a chance. If you keep them under 200, that's a recipe for success. But you cannot allow Kansas State's offense to be their best defense, because the way you attack this Kansas State team is through the air. Darian Mensah was carving them up last week, right until he wasn't. But until the end of that game, he's a young quarterback who wasn't even expected to be the starter for Tulane. He finally, had some freshman mistakes. You're not going to have that with Noah Fafita. So Kansas State's defense, the more you can keep it on the sideline, the better off the Wildcats will be. I think they win the game 27-17. So lower scoring than people might think. Could have a lot of points. I think both offenses are going to perform under what their fan bases probably expect. The college game day game this week is not a highly heralded matchup. This is a weird slate of college football. There are a lot of really interesting games. Tomorrow on the show, we'll talk about Texas A&M and Florida. We'll talk about the Backyard Brawl later. But there isn't a big, high-profile matchup, right? Last week, it was Texas and Michigan. And you just don't have one of those games this week. But LSU, South Carolina, is it interesting? Well, yeah, Shane Beamer's team made it a lot more interesting when they went into Lexington and just walloped the Wildcats. That was really impressive. That said, there might not be a team in the country that needs a win more than LSU and Brian Kelly. After losing their first game to USC in Las Vegas, coming back home, and they had a fine performance against Nichols. It wasn't incredible, but it wasn't a disaster either. It's fine. If you can go on the road and pick up an SEC win, I think that would go a long ways to settling fans' potential concerns about Brian Kelly. But certainly from a playoff standpoint, there is no question about it. No way you can slice it. LSU has to win this football game. If they don't win this game, and I don't see South Carolina as a conference title contender or a playoff dark horse, they could just be a solid team. Shane Beamer is trying to give himself some job security on that side, and it would be a big win. It would catapult him into the top 25, and they could start 2-0 in SEC play. But LSU cannot lose this game if they want to make the playoff. 10-2, that gets you into the playoff. Newsflash, LSU not going to win the rest of their games after this matchup against South Carolina. I have faith in LSU. I did not sell my stock after they lost in week 1 to USC. I think the Trojans are just better than a lot of people thought they were going to be. So I think LSU wins this football game. I think the offense clicks. I'm a big Garrett Nussmeier fan. I think the defense is improved from a season ago. I think you saw that in the season opener against USC. That's got a good quarterback and a lot of weapons, and it wasn't that high scoring of a game. I will take LSU here and swallow the points. I think it is LSU 31, South Carolina 17. Final score. I think the Tigers get the sort of statement victory that they're looking for. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter at @McLaughlinCFB is the handle. Maybe the most underrated rivalry in college football, the Backyard Brawl. Pitt, West Virginia. Is Neil Brown coaching for his job? Not exactly, but kinda. That's coming up next. First, this episode is brought to you by Factor. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. They have 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons to choose from. So every single week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. That's why you need to check out Factor Meals. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. They've got everything that you want over there. Go check out Factor Meals today. This episode also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. Why? They're America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel any time. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of Sunday, September 15th, pregame moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, September 12th. View your account page to learn more about how you boost. And guess what? They've got everything you want for college football because that's the way FanDuel rolls. Spreads, over-unders, money line, everything you want, it's all over there. Go to FanDuel.com to get America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. FanDuel, official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. Pressure for Neil Brown to beat Pitt this week? Well, it's the Backyard Brawl, one of the best rivalries in college football, so there's always pressure to win. That's Paul Rockel, also known as Mountaineer Paul, and our Locked On West Virginia host joining me here on the show. Let's start there before we get into the matchup itself, Paul. How badly does Neil Brown need to win this football game?
Extremely bad. If you look at Neil Brown, one of the biggest criticisms of Neil Brown is that he has won a big game on the road in his career. I don't know if Pitt qualifies as that, but it's similar to the Ohio State or Michigan philosophy that you can go 1-11, but the one you better damn well win is the Pitt win, right? This is the biggest rivalry that we have. Alongside Virginia Tech, they're probably tied in some people's eyes, but Pitt's been going on for over 100 years. It's truly one of the historic rivalries of college football that got shaken up because of realignment. And now we're at the point where these kids are having to be educated on the rivalry, although it's been back for 2 years, and they finally have a taste of it. If you don't know how exciting it is, go back and look at the last 2 years' games. They've broken a lot of records. The crowds are really fired up, obviously, at these games, as they are at rivalry games. But, yes, to answer your question, this is a huge game for Neil Brown, and it's on the road. You know, it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, that stadium is extremely loud, and it'll be full.
Yeah, and I think that if you're a college football fan and you haven't watched a Backyard Brawl before, I'll be honest with you. The first one I watched really start to finish was last year. I'd seen clips and heard about, but it's a fantastic college football viewing product. You're going to have a hostile crowd. Things are going to get chippy. It's everything a college football rivalry should be. And I think for Neil Brown, he doesn't, get fired, obviously, if he loses this game. But if you look back after this season and the Mountaineers, don't want to go back to him as their head coach, it feels like, Paul, things would have to spiral. And this would be the first step along that spiral. And that's where the pressure element, I think, ratchets up for Neil Brown in addition to the rivalry factor.
Yeah. I will say this. Obviously, it's really unfair to ask any team to start with Penn State, to start the year. That was a tough way to start the year. And so in game one, before you figured anything out, to play a team with so much talent on defense, it'd be hard for any offense to do. I don't think our offense really played as well as they could have, much like last year. We played them in game one and lost. You see us playing against North Carolina and shred those guys. Obviously, we were a lot better by the year's end. Similarly here, this is our second power-bound game in 3 games, and it's going to be a tough game. Obviously, Patt Narduzzi is the defensive-minded head coach. Cade Bell has been brought in as their offensive coordinator. They've got a top 30 guy at quarterback who transferred in from Alabama that's really been shredding the first 2 games of the season. And if you want to look at a problem area for the Mountaineers, it's been pass defense, and they are ranked in the 80s or 90s now at this point in pass defense. And Holstein, while I'm not sold on him at all, certainly has the pedigree to give the Mountaineers some trouble in this game.
He certainly looked good last week. Pitt had a dramatic comeback win. I mean dramatic. They were trailing big time in that game on the road against Cincinnati, and then you look up and they squeak out a win 28-27, the final score. Eli Holstein had 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Desmond Reed had over 250 scrimmage yards rushing and receiving. He was over 100 for both. For West Virginia's defense in this game, Paul, you got to be able to slow those two guys down, which is easier said than done, but they're playing with a lot of confidence after the comeback and the performances they had last week. Feels like that's where you've got to start, is disrupt the quarterback and slow down Desmond Reed.
Desmond Reed is an electric player. Go look up Deuce Vaughn. That's exactly what he looks like.
I like that comp a lot. That's a good comp.
Electric player and scary. He really is. This is the most skilled offensive team I've seen Pitt have in a long time. Sincere Lee is their third receiver, probably. He's a really good player. He's probably a number 2 guy in most teams. Kanata Mumfield, who's been there for a couple of years, had 125 yards last week against Cincinnati. He's really good as well. They're going to be a tough team to stop on offense. I'm just not sold on the quarterback. I don't think he's as good as he's looked the first 2 games, and I think the competition has a lot to do with that. I think West Virginia has just been figuring out a lot of things. West Virginia hasn't been getting beaten as much as it's all about alignment and assignment. That's where they've lost the first 2 games on defense, even though they didn't lose the second game. I mean, as far as how bad the defense has looked in the back end so far, that back end has been the problem. And I think it gets fixed this week in the Backyard Brawl better.
When you look at this game for West Virginia from an offensive standpoint, Paul, what do they have to do to win this game on the road? According to our friends at FanDuel, they're a 1.5-point favorite. So this is essentially a toss-up in the eyes of the odds makers. Another reason that you should be watching. It's a great rivalry, but it should be a great football game as well. How does West Virginia win the game offensively?
The same way we did last year. Control the clock, run the ball. They probably can't stop us from running the ball. We've been able to run the ball on pretty much anybody we put our minds to. We've got a first-round left tackle. We've got a guard that's going to be projected mid-round draft pick on the left side, and then we've got a center that's really come on. We've got 5 guys that have played a lot of football, probably one of the most experienced offensive lines in the country there. So that's what you lean on. You've got 2 running backs that most people would say are really good. You give Jaheim White the ball and let him do what he does. I think he's the best back in this game, and that includes the kid over there at Pitt, but we'll see. But you control the clock. You don't put too much pressure on your defense. And you let Garrett Green be Garrett Green. I think Garrett Green really shows up in this game. He didn't play in last year's game. We had to win that game with the backup, which was a 16-7 slobber knocker. So I think this game's going to be a bit higher scoring. Probably take the over.
Yeah, I think the over right now, according to FanDuel, 63.5. So you can see a lot of points in this football game. Is there anything as classic Big 12 and what used to be the Big East, of course, when that was still a thing for football, RIP. Let's get to predictions here, Paul. I think this is going to be a wildly entertaining game. I'm going with the home team, though. I'm going against your Mountaineers here. I think Pitt has got a lot. They have to manage the emotional letdown. They've got to manage that component, because when you have a big comeback victory where you're trailing and it was 21-3 or some big deficit last week, you can have that emotional letdown factor. But when you got a toss up, I'm going with the home team here. I like Patt Narduzzi as a coach. I think Neil Brown is solid. I think it's going to be a really fun football game to watch. But give me the Panthers 35-31. I think they get it done.
Yeah, I think we beat them last year with a lot of the same players. They have definitely upgraded, but I still think we're a better football team, and I think we'll prove that on Saturday. I would never pick the Pitt Panthers in a win. It would never happen.
What would have to happen? Is there any scenario that you can possibly envision in which you would pick Pitt to win this football game?
You know what? Let's say next year, let's say we go 6-6 again this year, and Neil Brown's still sticking around for another 7th year next year. We continue to live in mediocrity into perpetuity, then yes. Then I will probably be in that kind of situation where I may pick Pitt just out of spite.
What's your score prediction?
I'm going to go 23-13.
23-13. So you're taking the under that 63.5 number.
Yeah. I need the Mountaineers defense to show up in this one. So I'm probably picking that with my heart a little bit. But yeah, I need the Mountaineers defense to show up in this game. I'm not worried about the offense. It'll be there.
Mountaineer Paul, host of Lockdown West Virginia, one of our newer shows here at the network. Go check him out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Paul, appreciate the time.
Thanks, man.
So let's go over to the Big Ten, because we've talked about the Big 12, but the Big Ten has got a pretty solid lineup of games. The battle for last place is at the Rose Bowl this week, and look, I'm just getting ready to dunk on some of you out there if it goes a certain way. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. There's a reason 2.5 million small businesses, they're using LinkedIn for hiring. They know where their bread is buttered. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's go to the Rose Bowl. It's what I call the battle for last place. Loser of this game might finish in last place in the Big Ten. That's Jacob Goins, Locked On Indiana Hoosiers, joining me. We're going to get to every Big Ten game prediction right here on this very segment, but we start with my personal favorite Big Ten matchup of the week. Not just because it's an actual Big Ten conference game, Jacob, but because the loser of this game might not find themselves above 18th place. The winner might not win a game the rest of the year. What's your take on UCLA, Indiana?
I think you're wrong, but that's okay. That's okay. UCLA is one of those teams. They're 1-0 after a disgusting win over Hawaii. And so it's foolish for me to hop on here and say, this is what UCLA is. They're going to do this. They're going to do this. And we have to prepare for this. We just don't know a whole lot about UCLA. Their quarterback had a touchdown and 2 picks last week against the Rainbow Warriors, and they had to come back to beat Hawaii on the road. So it is in UCLA. It's on the road, but Indiana broke an offensive record last week. Spencer, 77 points, over 700 yards. Hasn't been done since 1901.
I tell you what, the West Texas High School JV team put up quite a fight. Quite a fight in that football game.
Hey, we had to extend their losing streak. We had to do it. I can't.
It's true. For those who don't know, their opponent was Western Illinois. Literally have now lost 26 consecutive football games. Tough times for the Leathernecks.
Yeah, that is correct. But I think for this game, Indiana has confidence. Head coach Kurt Cignetti is very, very vocal about business trip. Go out, take care of business, and let's move on. And if Indiana plays good, I think they can win. But it's Indiana, and we've seen this story before, so all is up for grabs on Saturday.
It's a little bit of a mystery game in that we think we have an idea, but you know, look at who Indiana's played in their first 2 games. Do we really know? We've seen 1 game from UCLA. It was ugly. We've never seen Deshaun Foster as a head coach. Like, we don't know.
We saw him. We saw him at Big Ten Media Day.
Yeah, but he still is undefeated as a head coach. Fact check true. Fact check true. Deshaun Foster unbeaten as a head coach. Kurt Cignetti can't say that. There's my UCLA fighting terms. I think the Hoosiers go into the Rose Bowl, win this football game, and propel UCLA to a 2-10 football season. I had 3-9 before the year. I think it can get even worse. Their schedule is just brutal. It's a reset year, and look, I think Foster's coming into a tough situation. I've got Indiana winning. I think it's ugly though. I think this is a 23-16 football game.
Ooh, that is gross. I'm going to say 28-17. I think Indiana will win. I think their defense is better than people give them credit for. It may not look good, but it will end up good. And I think Indiana wins. I think they cover a spread. They're favored on the road. It seems sketchy, but I think Indiana will be just fine. Charlotte next week, and then Maryland at home. Watch out for the Hoosiers.
Somebody call Admiral Akbar. Indiana -3.5 on the road. It's a trap. It's a trap. It absolutely is. Rest of the Big Ten slate. A lot of games this week. Not so many in the conference variety, of course, like the one we mentioned. But I want to get your rapid-fire picks and thoughts on each of these games here, Jacob. We are going to go quickly because we got plenty of games to hit, and there are plenty of fun storylines to look at here. Oregon at Oregon State in Corvallis. Ducks haven't won there since 2018.
Yeah, look, it's not just because I'm with you. I am going to take Oregon. I'm going to take the Ducks. You told us the other day, if the offensive line gets it figured out, Oregon's a really good football team. I think they do. I think they figure it out at least this week for sure. Oregon's just the better team. Don't overthink it. Give me the Ducks.
That's an if on the offensive line. And if it happens, that, if X, then Y, but X has to happen first. Bama, any upset alert going to Madison to play the Badgers of Wisconsin?
Unfortunately not. I know they struggled with USF, but they ended up doing what they needed to do. I just haven't been impressed with Wisconsin. And until I do, the fans will be hyped up and ready. But no, Bama's still Bama. Give me the Crimson Tide.
Arkansas State, I think Michigan bounces back here. Wouldn't be surprised if they cover that 23.5 point number in Ann Arbor. I would not want to be a Wolves fan this week. I think Michigan will run the football a lot, and I don't think Arkansas State can stop them.
It'll be gross. It'll be ugly, gross Michigan football. They'll win. They'll probably cover. They'll feel good about themselves until they get back into Big Ten play. So, yeah, I'll take Michigan this week, but not for long.
How about the 2-0 Fighting Illini of Illinois? Brett Bielema has got Central Michigan in town, 18-point favorite. I don't know if they cover that number, but I'm taking them at home. If they're beating Kansas at home, certainly they should take care of the Chippewas.
I'll take them with the points. Why not? I mean, they beat Kansas a week ago. It's Central Michigan. Yeah, give me the Fighting Illini because nobody else will. I'll take them with the points. 18, give me them.
Here's one where we have to see if either of us have the intestinal fortitude to pick the upset here for a second straight week. Notre Dame at Purdue. Ryan Walters looking for a statement victory in his second season as head coach of the Boilermakers. This is in West Lafayette. Notre Dame just had one of the biggest upsets of the whole entire season over the last 5 years since, Notre Dame lost to Marshall. Notre Dame favored by 10 on the road. Do the Boilermakers have another upset in them?
I don't think I'm physically capable of picking Purdue to win this game. And yes, it's because it's Purdue. I don't know what they're going to do. They're not good still. You want to talk about battle for last place in the Big Ten. It's Purdue. Notre Dame is not great, but they're still a good football team. Don't be fooled. Notre Dame on the road. They'll claim as the second best team in the state of Indiana this week.
Michigan State will start 3-0 when they take on Prairie View A&M. No issues there. Minnesota should be able to handle Nevada at home, right?
I don't know. Never sleep on Nevada. I'll take Minnesota. I don't feel good about it, though, Spencer. I don't feel good about it.
I don't hate a Nevada cover there. I think Jeff Choate has got a much better team than people might have thought coming into the season. They were picked towards the bottom of the Mountain West. That point spread 17.5. I might lean towards the Wolfpack. Ooh. I'm saving my pick on this next one till tomorrow because, frankly, I don't know. I haven't made a decision yet. The Apple Cup. First time since Wazoo was left behind by the Huskies and everybody else in the Pac-12. RIP. Washington State. It's a neutral site, but it's in Seattle, not Pullman. Where do you have this one going?
I'm going to take Washington by a hair. I mean, I think it's a really good game. Washington, we all saw it, or Washington State, last week. They did something, and they found something a week ago. I think they're a good team. I think Washington just has a little bit more talent, even though they lost so much since Kalen DeBoer left. Give me Washington, but it could be a field goal either way that decides this thing.
John Mateer, maybe one of the few players in the country who is his team's leading rusher and leading passer. Cougs riding high after the dominant victory against Texas Tech at home last week, but now they have to go on the road. Iowa hosts Troy. Poor Troy. I don't know if they're scoring a point in Iowa City.
And Iowa will score 5, and they'll still win the football game because they got humbled and brought back down to earth last week. So, yeah, Iowa will win.
By the way, total in that game, 38.5. I feel like the under is the lock of the week. I think that is my favorite under bet of the week is Iowa and Troy. I don't think Troy's going to go in there and score a point. I really don't.
Probably not.
So, Northern Iowa at Nebraska. Do the Cornhuskers have an emotional letdown after the big win over Colorado? I don't think so because I think this is a good football team. Maybe they stumble a little bit out of the gate, but I don't think Northern Iowa is going to give them too many issues.
No, I think Nebraska's a really good football team. I think they're better than what people gave them credit for. And look, I picked them to beat Colorado, but I was waiting to see how they performed on a big stage, and they did it. They did what we wanted them to do. So, yeah, Nebraska wins this week. I'm with you. Maybe a rough start at the beginning, but they'll be just fine at the end.
Eastern Illinois to Northwestern. Let's just understand that Northwestern's going to win that football game. How about Tony Elliott's Virginia Cavaliers? 2-0 to start the year off a 1-point narrow win against Wake Forest last week at home against Maryland in a once ACC battle is now an ACC Big Ten clash, of course, and has been for some time, but it still looks a little strange to me. This is going to be a good football game, but I like the Terrapins here.
I like Maryland too. And a reminder, I said earlier, they come to Bloomington in a couple of weeks. So I'm really fascinated to get some more information on this Maryland team. I think they win. I think this sounds dumb, but I think they just score more points than Virginia does. I think they're a little bit higher powered on the offensive side than Virginia. At home, though, for Virginia, kind of interesting. People will overlook this game. They'll override it. They won't tune in, but you should. I'll take Maryland, but it could go either way.
Incredible insight from Jacob Goins. They're going to score more points, and that's why he likes them. They're going to score more points. You
can't argue with it.
Teams that outscore their opponents do have a win percentage upwards of 99%, historically speaking. Jacob Goins, Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate it as always, man.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.